The top rock formation that we see here is called Aeolianite and is a very rare type of rock which only occurs on Orkney and the Hebrides. And the name Aeolianite comes from Aeolian sand, and the name Aeolian comes from the Greek god Aeolus, the god of the wind. And these sands are deposited here long before Aeolus was born in the Greek mind, and that was probably during the Ice Age or at the end of the Ice Age, in the period when the glaciers had gone and the continental shelf was battered by extremely strong winds which swept up the shell sand that was had accumulated on the continental shelf, and which one has to imagine came from down there in a kind of depression on the sea bottom, just in this direction, about along the rock formation of Hoy, coming in onto this beach near Stromness. The idea that the sea would have dropped 100 meters may be difficult to imagine, but thinking of Hoy being about 400 meters high, what we see there, we can have an idea how much lower then there was a large lowland which stretches all the way to the Hebrides, and which was the playground of very, very heavy and strong winds that carried the sand, and in first place this Aeolian sand up the glaciers maybe, or later anyway up the hills of the island that emerged after the sea level rose. This, for instance, is a rock that has fallen from the wall there, and it is an extremely brittle type of rock. It is basically a chemical bond of shell sand with a high lime content, and it just also erodes very easily by the sea, and probably a lot more of this area would have been covered by this type of Aeolian rock. But the point here is that the story is very much about the wind, and this is Aeolian sand is one of the most remarkable things of the period just after the Ice Age. But up the hills here of Orkney you find enormous amounts of beach sand which have been blown up to the hills up to 150 meters high, coming all from the plain there, and that indicates that there were extremely strong winds, probably beyond anything we know today. And I think that these winds recurred during what I would call the Neolithic Ice Age between 4000 and 3000 BC. That is the period we're going to talk about in this movie. It is especially the structure of the rock as it erodes under the rain which gives me the idea that it may have been layers of sand on glaciers, and when the glaciers melted away, all this sand got compacted and formed this rock, this Aeolianite. One thing is for sure, that it originates down there somewhere, and one has to imagine that these islands, before they got islands were basically a promontory of Scotland mainland, and that by the sea rise, this enormous plain formed also enormous beaches, and those beaches eventually then provided the sand that has been blown up these hills, and one can imagine that these islands were first, and even the land bridge between Orkney and Caithness must have been just a dune system, just loose sand, and maybe also aeolianite, but as we see, it is very brittle, so it is easily eroded. And I think that one gets a better picture of all the developments on Orkney when one sees that this was first a promontory, then became one island, then became two islands, and only after, I think, the Stone Age, Orkney became the archipelago that it is today.